All right, this is an informational meeting prior to a vote on on adding to the program statement of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County, a couple of positions having to do with county government. And we started a study on the question at the annual meeting in 2021. So it's taken a little while to get through the study process in order to present it to the members. And as we were going along, we have presented information to the members by what we've had a couple of meetings with a discussion of what county government is and what the issues are. We've also had several very informative stories, articles about county government in the Voter over the past few months. So I'm assuming that the people in this call have some basic understanding of where we're at and what the issues are, and that they've read the report. It wasn't an assignment, but I suspect that if you're interested enough to show up on 6:30 on Wednesday night, you have enough interest to have read the report and know what we're talking about here. So I have a short PowerPoint, so we'll do that first and then get to some discussion. Let's see. So you got that?
Yep.
Okay. So as I say, this is sort of the conclusion of a project. And let's see, that's not the first one. We started the project with appointing a task force, and in the link at the website, you'll see the members of the task force. And basically, I appointed task force members, people who had members of the league, people who had knowledge of the county, and people who had sort of members of the community that we thought could add to the discussion with their viewpoints. And so the task force, the first thing we had was a report, which is also linked to the website. And then the task force discussed that and basically made some recommendations based on the report, but also heavily weighting their own experience with the county. And the recommendations were that the county auditor should be appointed by the county board, that the county coroner should continue to be elected, and third, the most effective form of county governance is a county-wide elected board chair. And so we're going to talk about these one by one. So should the county auditor be elected? This issue has been in a referendum before the voters once a few years ago, and the issue comes up regularly. So part of the purpose of the study was to make sure that the next time this issue comes up before the voters, the league will be in a position to make a recommendation and do some education and advocacy. And the recommendation was that the county auditor should be appointed by the county board. And basically, here are some of the reasons. The auditor is integral to the timely functioning of county government. The auditor pays the bills, and the bills must be paid on time. And one of the major conclusions that we came to is everyday competence is more important than the elected auditor's ability to operate independently of the county board. And the reasons for this, the voters don't know what the auditor does, so how can they evaluate the professional qualifications that are necessary for a professional job? And the county board can hire a professional and then fire them if need be, and ensuring competence through the hiring process, and also the ability to change auditors if necessary, as opposed to the 4 years of elected term. And I think an important point is that the county, like all government units, has an independent outside auditor that reviews the accounts every year and issues a public report. So it is not like if you have an appointed auditor, there isn't any outside observation and reporting going on. And so, let's see. So the conclusion of the task force and the conclusion that's going to be going for a vote on Monday night is that the elected auditor's office should be abolished. And so I'm going to stop after each section so that we can take care of questions right then and there, and you won't have to hold them. So I know, let me say just for everyone, Lynn and Kathleen were both members of the task force, and Deb and I were co-chairs. And so almost half the people here were involved in the task force recommendations. So anybody have any questions or comments? Lynn or Kathleen, you want to make any comments?
One other point about appointing the auditor was that they can be, there can be standards set up by the county board, and the auditor evaluated on those points. And that's, I think, a good function.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Lynn, and we can have standards. We can have requirements for people that we hire, and that's really important for an auditor. They control a lot of money.
We're certainly in the past, we've had auditors who were not accountants. The current auditor is, but it's one would think a necessary part of the job, but it is not a requirement for the elected office.
And I think people need to understand this is your money. These are tax dollars.
Any questions? Peggy, Todd, Ann?
Kind of a basic question. What's the difference between the treasurer and the auditor? Like, where do their roles differ?
Why don't you take that, Deb?
So the treasurer is the official collector for the county and collects all of the monies that the county collects for property taxes, collects grants, fees, things like that are collected by the treasurer's office and distributed appropriately to the bodies or the entities that those funds are supposed to go to. And the treasurer is also responsible for the investment of all county funds. The auditor, on the other hand, is responsible for the accounting system. The auditor is responsible for paying the bills for all county offices on a daily basis, and ensuring that every bill that comes through the auditor's office is appropriate for payment, whether it's by a policy established by the county board or a budget that each department has to follow, or contracts for services where they're responsible for making sure all the terms of the contract are adhered to when payments are made. So it's literally, they do auditing and accounting every day with regard to the entire $125 million of county budget that gets spent every year. And then also work with the outside auditor to complete and prepare the annual financial report, CAFR, basically outside audit of all the county's funds on an annual basis.
So it's kind of a misleading title in that you think of an auditor as someone who comes in after the fact and looks at the books. But in fact, the county role for an auditor is much more in the matter of paying bills, and in that way has interaction every day with every county office. And so it's a very much of a sort of an internal facing kind of office.
And for example, the auditor on a monthly basis reports to the county board any purchases or payments that are made outside of the parameters of the policies established by the board. Elected officials don't have to follow those policies, but other offices do. And so if any purchase is made outside of those policies, the board ultimately has to approve that expenditure before it can be made when the auditor brings it to the board at their monthly meeting. So.
Okay. And all of these and all of these functions would continue to be done just by an official that would be appointed by the county board and part of the sort of the financial structure of the county. Peggy?
Have we, it sounds like we've had an elected auditor in Champaign County for a really long time. I mean,
There's only 10 counties that have elected auditors. It's was sort of automatically a function of time. Once you hit a certain population point, you have an auditor. At least one county has voted to get rid of their auditor. Other counties have been considering it. It's perhaps doesn't really fit well in the modern accounting system.
and did you say that because I don't recall this, that there was a referendum in the distant past, the recent
Yeah,
past?
not too long ago. All three elected offices that could be abolished were up on the ballot at the same time: the coroner, auditor, and the recorder. And all of them were, and none of them were approved. Now the recorder was up again a couple of years ago, but that was separately.
Hold on.
So to abolish the office would require a referenda. The referenda could either be put on the ballot by the county board or could be put on the ballot by way of a citizen petition. So that's probably step 2 after we get this in place.
Sure.
Figuring out how to do this. And yeah.
Just refresh my memory. Am I correct that by state constitution, neither the auditor nor the coroner has to be an elected position? Is that right?
That's right. The
Okay.
sheriff, the county clerk, and the treasurer have to be elected positions. There's no choice about it. They're in the Constitution, but
Right.
no other office has to be.
And your team is recommending that the auditor be an appointed position.
Right.
And then we'll talk about the coroner.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? No, then we'll go to the next one. Should the county coroner be elected? And the task force recommended that the county coroner continue to be elected. And so why the difference in these two? Well, they're very different offices. The coroner's office is outward facing. He deals with the public and with law enforcement. And the voters basically understand what the coroner does. It's a very, very old office, but whether it's TV or whatever else it is, but everyone pretty much understands that the coroner's duties are to investigate and deaths and issue death certificates. So in that way, the voters have a way of evaluating the candidates for office in a way they can't with the auditor because they really don't know what the auditor does. The other and a major point here is that if the office is abolished, the state law requires a medical examiner system, and a medical examiner has to be a doctor, licensed doctor. And the counties that have a medical examiner system have found that the pool of licensed doctors that want to be medical examiners is not very large, and that it's very expensive. And so basically, the task force concluded that the elected auditor coroner should be retained because the present system works well and is less costly. So talk about that. Anne.
On the coroner, what are the requirements to run for that office?
Let's see. It flew right out of my head, Anne.
I'm sorry. And it wasn't I didn't see it in the report. And I honestly don't know.
The elected coroner does not have specific requirements to run for office, but as soon as he or she is elected, there are educational requirements imposed by the state that have to be completed within a certain amount of time of being elected. And then annually, there are CEUs that that individual has to do to maintain the position. Right, Trish?
Yeah, I've been a long time since I've dealt with the coroner
Yeah,
as a,
that's basically the requirements to be a candidate are similar to the requirements of running for county board or many of the other offices. You have to be a citizen of the county and, but once elected, this office probably has more training requirements than some of the other elected officers do in order for them to complete the job.
Thank you. And one follow-up to that.
Yeah.
You chose to recommend that the elected position be retained. Why not have an appointed coroner?
There is no appointed coroner. There's only a medical examiner. So it's.
Is that by state law that you can't do that?
Yeah. If you have a coroner, they're elected. If you don't have a coroner, you have to have a medical examiner.
So that's different from the auditor position.
Right.
That you can appoint the county can appoint an auditor.
Right.
If it chooses.
Right.
But it cannot appoint a coroner.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's why even the counties that have a medical examiner system and struggle with it continue to have it, because otherwise they'd have to reinstate an elected coroner through referendum. And I think, as a matter of fact, I think it's becoming more common for counties to get together and sort of hire the same person. So maybe we'll get a full-time person instead of a full-time person part-time in their county as opposed to a part-time doctor. Okay, any other questions about the coroner?
Oh, one of the things I learned through the work on the task force was the additional responsibilities the coroner has with the sheriff's department. That when there's a problem with the sheriff, the coroner can step in. I didn't realize that.
Hopefully not required.
Right.
Sort of a backup, I guess. You can see the roots of these systems in the 18th century, yes. Where the counties weren't very big and many people have multiple jobs. Okay, we'll go on to the last question. And the question of the governance system for the county board, and the task force recommended countywide elected board chair. As the report states, there's several different systems, and the three most relevant here are the elected county executive, which we have right now, the countywide elected board chair, which is the form used in most of the smaller counties and the bigger counties in the state, and the form we used to have before about 4 years ago, which was their county board. There's a county board and they have a chair, and the chair is elected by the members from amongst themselves. So that was voted out in a referendum where they were on the ballot this question: countywide elected board chair and elected county executive. And although the board chair got the most votes, because of some aspects of state law, the elected executive was held to have precedence. So why did the task force not recommend the current system? From the experience of the members of the task force and the community, the most important issue for the county board is improved leadership, which presumably improves the decision-making of the board. And the elected county executive is not structured to provide leadership to the county board. And the 4 years of experience that we had shows that the elected executive can provide professional administration, but is not a member of the county board and can be ignored by it. And that effectively means that they are because they are outside the county board, they what they say can, and for the last 4 years, it's pretty much been ignored. In the other system of the county-wide elected board chair, the board chair would work with the county board members every day, prepares agenda, committee assignments, and county priorities, would be part of that position. And we believe election by the voters of the whole county gives permanent authority that election from among the board members does not. We all remember that the last few elections of county board chair has often been accompanied by considerable political turmoil and maneuverings. And one of the other reasons is that the countywide board chair is a more transparent decision, because many of the decisions that he or she would make have to go to the entire board for approval. Many of the decisions the elected executive makes do not have to go to the board. In fact, don't have to be really public in any way. For instance, if the elected executive hires an administrator, that process doesn't need to be approved. That person doesn't need to be approved by the county board, and therefore maybe it doesn't have the same relationship as an administrator that's been approved. In the report that we had commissioned, the consultants had basically stated that they felt the possibility that a home rule, which is only possible under the elected executive form, will be an important reason for preferring that form. We, in fact, the task force found it almost to be the opposite, in the sense of we do not think home rule is appropriate for Champaign County. No county has ever elected to give home rule to their county board. And this county board certainly hasn't exhibited any particularly let's see, good decision-making processes. I guess I'll leave it at that. And so this is why we have made that recommendation. So, questions?
Tricia, I'm not sure I understood the last thing you said, or the last point you made, that
About transparency?
About home rule being a negative factor.
Well, home rule basically gives the county board just a wide, sweeping authority to enact taxes, or, for instance, to increase the property tax above the tax cap that now keeps it in place, to regulate businesses, impose business taxes and things like that. And that's not, county boards have never traditionally done that. And another reason is that it poses immediately, it's going to pose some problems with coordinating with home rule powers of municipalities. If both the county board and the municipality are regulating business, a business would have different requirements that could pose problems. And there has never been that kind of situation in Illinois before. And so we don't really have any ways of solving it or dealing with it. And that's, I guess we don't particularly want to be what's the word? The lead case for figuring out what a county board might do with home rule. And home rule has been, Illinois municipalities have had home rule since 1970, if they were more than 25,000. In our county, a couple of under 25,000 cities have voted for home rule. One was Rantoul. They were home rule, but they lost it when their population went down. And then Savoy, who instated it recently, who had it, the voters voted for it recently, and they made a strong case of needing home rule powers in order to compete with the cities of Champaign and Urbana, that they could with home rule, they could, for instance, have a gas tax that they couldn't have otherwise. And basically, the kind of revenue that Champaign and Urbana get, say, from visitors and that kind of thing could be imposed. So, any other questions? You know, this is, and
Oh, no, Kathy, go ahead, please.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly then with, that would in essence eliminate the Darlene Klopel position?
yes. Mhm. Instead of electing an executive, we would elect a county board chair. And we've had several conversations with Darlene. And this would be her recommendation as well. In fact, she doesn't feel that the county board elected executive has been very functional. Certainly, she felt that there were many things that she wanted to do and couldn't do because of the structure of that particular job. And Anne?
A couple of questions. Am I understanding correctly that although the voters voted for this form of county government, having an executive, the voters didn't actually create a job description for the county executive? It sounded from your report that it was the county board that created situations that prevented that position from operating effectively. Am I reading too much into the report, or?
One of the problems is that the county executive, the law concerning the county executive in the state statutes is not very complete. Because there's only one county that has ever had it, and they sort of do what they want, and nobody really challenges it very much. In this case, it was challenged, and it turns out there are lots of things that are unclear about what a county executive can and can't do. There's one case right now in front of the Supreme Court about who appoints a vacancy.
Right.
But there are several other issues that the county executive and the county board had different opinions about. They just haven't litigated those yet.
So these sorts of issues may have led to the inability of the current executive position to be very effective. Would that be
Those
right?
things, but we think at base, it's difficult to be a leader if you are not part of the board. If you're outside the board, you're not responsible to them, they're not responsible to you. You know, if you have, for instance, a city administrator who is a leader, okay, but the city administrator is responsible to the council that hires and fires. Here, trying to lead a group that you are not a member of, and who can fight back in all different ways, and that's, I think, what makes it ineffective. A county board chair, this is a form that is much more familiar in Illinois. There's 10 counties. Most of the bigger counties have this form because they found it's a good form for improving the professional administration of a county. You can have a county board chair who is not elected. Being elected as chair doesn't mean that you're going to be doing the day-to-day professional work of administering the county, which in some ways that's the implication of a county executive, that they're going to be doing administrative decision-making. In the case of the county board chair system, those counties normally then hire a county administrator to do those kinds of functions, and the administrator is approved by the whole board and therefore has a relationship with the whole board.
Thanks. That was going to be my second question, is can you have a higher paid administrator under the county board chair form of government?
Sure.
And evidently you can.
Mhm.
The report talked a lot about dissatisfaction with the current situation.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, how did you go about gathering public opinion on satisfaction or dissatisfaction?
Well, I think the referendum votes themselves show a high degree of dissatisfaction. There was more than 50% of the voters wanted to change. They wanted something different.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I mean, since then,
Oh, since,
for the last 4 years.
well, what we have is the dissatisfaction of both the county executive and the county board members, and their inability to basically establish a working relationship. Now, you elect someone else and they may, in fact, be able to do that. But one of the things that the county board has done is they have established a salary for this position that basically indicates they are not looking for a professional with experience, because a professional with experience would not want to take a job that has the lowest salary of any elected official in the whole county. I mean, it's kind of a way of putting them in their place, isn't it? It's
So the county board members themselves met with the committee and expressed dissatisfaction?
nope, we haven't met with the county board members themselves.
Okay.
But they've certainly have expressed dissatisfaction at every county board meeting. So,
Okay, thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah, Trish, one thing I think is
Oh,
important
Kathleen.
for people to understand is how uneducated our county citizens are about their county government. And if there's any way that this process can help us to figure out new and better ways to educate, not only would the recommendations be good, but I think members of the county need to understand how it works and how their money's being spent. And we haven't done a very good job about that.
And just as a little further information, and our consultants did meet with representatives or members of the county board caucuses, both the Republican caucus and the Democrat caucus. And they made excellent attempts to meet with community groups, but there was very little interest, as Kathleen indicated, of community groups. They tried to meet with the Black Ministers Alliance, they tried to meet with the ACLU, just to name a couple, and they couldn't get meetings with those groups because those groups didn't feel they had a role to play in a discussion about county governance. So that goes entirely to Kathleen's point that we as a league could do more to educate the public about this really is important to you, but it's just not well understood.
That's certainly true.
Kathy, did you have a point?
I had another question. So if the position would be that we would support doing away with the elected county executive, have an elected county chair, not just elected by the board, who then could appoint an administrator, which in essence would sort of administrate the county.
Yeah,
Why wouldn't I guess where I'm confused is why the elected county chair, and you have these other positions. Help me understand why we would need then that they would hire just, a county administrator.
Why don't you take that, Deb?
Well, in almost every county in Illinois, the county board does hire a county administrator to handle the day-to-day operations, administrative functions of county government on behalf of the county board. And county board chairs, I was an administrator for almost 20 years, working for county board chairs who were elected from among their members. But when a county board chair is elected countywide, that board chair probably just is in a stronger position because he's representing all the citizens of the county. He's been selected by all the citizens of the county, but the process for hiring an administrator would still be very similar. The county board would hire an administrator publicly through a search process, and that individual is then responsible for day-to-day operations and reporting to the board on a regular basis about how personnel operations are working, how financial operations are working, all those kinds of things. Does that help?
So in the line, an organization chart, then if we do away with the auditor and that position is then hired by the board, where would that position be with this county administrator? Reporting to the county administrator who reports to the county chair, the county board, or would they be on the same level?
Well, the responsibilities of the position are different. So it's not necessarily a position that's classified exactly the same as the county administrator. And that would be up to the board how they want to structure it. But certainly there are certain aspects of the appointed auditor functions that the board would want to be reported directly to the board. Not necessarily through an administrator.
And when it was voted and decided on the county executive, if I remember right, the referendum on the ballot was really confusing and not well written. So I wondered, who writes those? I mean, would the league have input? I had a conversation with a friend who we thought we had voted for the same thing, but we had not. She really, yeah. Anyway, so who writes those? The problem is they're not clear.
Usually the language is statutory and you don't have much choice.
That explains it.
Yes, yeah.
And
Is there an administrator now with the current system?
no,
No?
so the county executive acts sort of as a chief administrator. She has assistants. She has like a financial manager who does budget preparation and that kind of thing. And I think she has a personnel person too. Is that right, Deb?
She has an HR deputy. She has a director of finance deputy, IT operations deputy. She has a physical plant operations department head. And those are the real core functions of day-to-day operations over which the executive, provides guidance. The place where there can be a lack of transparency with all of that is that the executive doesn't have to report to the county board about any of those operations. And a county administrator has similar responsibility, but has to report to the county board and follow policies established by the county board about how all of those operations are going to be, overseen.
Mm-hmm. So in the proposed system that you all are talking about with a countywide elected board chair, those administrative roles would report to the board chair and the board.
To the board.
To the board itself.
Right.
Okay.
The board develops a contract with the county administrator, and the board, in a contract with a new county board chair system, may give some greater authority to the county board chair, but basically in that contract, the administrator has to report to the full board.
To the board. Got it. Thank you.
I was just wondering, this may not be something that your task force talked about, but I did wonder when Steve Summers, his part of his platform running for the county executive was to reduce the salary to $70,000, much as I recall, Mike Ingram ran the platform he ran on when he wanted to abolish recorder of deeds, wanted to be elected so he could abolish recorder of deeds. I mean, is that sort of the same logic or strategy behind, Steve Summers' campaign to ultimately just phase out the county executive? I mean, because it was never explained why that was part of his campaign, to run as county executive and to instantly reduce the salary considerably. I mean,
we talked with Steve Summers as the head of the Democratic Caucus, and he was supportive of the study. I'm not sure what his final conclusions of would ultimately be, but he was definitely supportive of the study.
And I think part of his strategy when he reduced the salary of the elected executive, when that recommendation was made, the county board budgeted for a county administrator because he thinks the county administrator form is probably a benefit. So there is a budget next year for a county administrator. The only problem is if there's a county administrator under the elected executive form of government, the administrator will be hired by the elected executive. It doesn't have to go through the county board. It doesn't have to adhere to a policy. It doesn't have to report to the county board. So although it's called a county administrator, it kind of lacks the transparency of the administrator who's hired by the county board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think maybe we've come to the end of this informational session. And as I said, the league members will be voting on whether to add this to their program statement at a meeting on Monday night, starting at 6:30. So we'd love to see you there. And if you have any other questions at that time, then we'll certainly be trying to answer them. Okie doke. All right. Well, I guess that's the end of the meeting.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
As a member of the task force, thank you to Deb and Trish for your really hard work. I mean, and thankless in many ways. So here's thanks from all of us that you probably don't hear from a lot of folks.
We both have a very strong attachment to the county, and we really want to see it doing better.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. So thank you on behalf of all the folks who are not going to write and say thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
But they do feel that way.
yeah, yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. And
Thank you.
Thanks.
We learned a little and helped a little with the explanation. So see you later, James.